What is the most important thing to invest in at work? Well, according to today's guest, it's the relationships with your colleagues. We're going to dive into what undermines strong relationships and how to foster positive connections with people that you don't necessarily like or agree with. And joining me today is Patricia Bathory. Patricia combines her role as a seasoned psychotherapist and the founder of a thriving import-export business to offer unique insights into the challenges faced by entrepreneurs and leaders. If you find this conversation valuable, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. New episodes are released every Tuesday. Now here's the conversation. Thank you so much for joining me today, Patricia. I really enjoyed reading your book, and it seems so obvious that relationships are important, but I feel like you really made it so clear as to why relationships are so important and what happens when we aren't thoughtful about how we build and sustain those relationships. And as you know, and you talk about, so much of what happens in the workplace is the relationships we have. So I'm so glad to dive into this topic with you today.
Yeah, unless you're a solopreneur, you're going to need people to work with you. And even if you are a solopreneur, you need to have partnerships with people. So absolutely, I'm excited to be here and to contribute with you.
Exactly. So maybe you should start with just kind of explaining, like, why is it that we should be so focused on our relationships, especially in the workplace when we have a million things on our to-do list and a bunch of goals we're trying to accomplish and all the other things. Like, why does it make sense to spend time thinking about and investing in those human relationships?
Because ultimately, we work with people. And to achieve goals, if you think of a company and the goals you need to do, I think hard about what can you do in a company that is just you and it doesn't depend on anybody. Because if you're the boss, it's like, oh yeah, if you're the boss, you don't need anybody. Just tell people what to do. If you're the boss and you tell people what to do, you call me and you let me know how that works, right? If you're not having good relationships with the people who work for you, that's going to fail. Now, you might be the best worker, the smartest, with the brilliant ideas. If you can't communicate them, and if you cannot be convincing, or if you cannot be likable to even present them, those ideas are going to die in your head. So you also need to have good relational skills in order to be able to communicate what it is that you want to contribute. So it is at the basis of everything that we do. And really, success is about being able to get along with different people in the workplace.
So much of what we kind of hear and read about is, you have to invest in these human relationships because that's how, it's how you motivate people and it's how you get things done. It's what people look for in a workplace, is they want to be with people they like. But I think the nuance that you're pulling out here, which is that we are in relationship all the time with our people. It is underlying everything that we are doing every single day. And if we want to be most effective, we need to be thoughtful about our own relational skills and the relationships we have with people. And we need to help other people build good relationships with us. It kind of shifts the perspective a little bit when you start thinking about this as a 24-hour-a-day thing and not just oh yeah, relationships are important, bring your human to work self, that kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. It's the single most impactful thing that you can do for yourself and for your career, because people are willing to contribute with you if you're likable, if you're approachable, if they are connected to you. Ultimately, I always use the word connected because even if you are the boss, you can get somebody to put in their effort, that put in their work, but that discretionary effort, that engagement, that extra will only come if people feel connected to their bosses, to their companies, to the general direction of the company. So if you want people to really be engaged and to really give their best, you have to have connections, because that's what gets people's motivation out.
So how do we measure the health of our relationships, right? How do we kind of know if we're doing it well or if we're really, maybe not doing it so well?
I think a lot of times we just assume things are one way or another. I always find that if you give yourself pause and sit down, and there's a few things you can evaluate, where, do we have respect? In the book, I use the 6 standards that that we use. So are you authentic in that relationship? Do you have respect? right? Are we equals? So there's some of these criteria that you can evaluate. And, and I think there's a difference between liking a person and having a good relationship with them. And especially when we talk about work, liking people is secondary to actually getting along. You can get along with somebody you don't like. You can work and you can achieve goals and success and deliverables even if you don't like that person. All you need to do is you need to respect, you need to understand, you need to collaborate. And those are the check points that you need to see if are we getting along and are we not. And once you check them and you can identify what is not working, then you can go, okay, this is what I need to work on. I feel disrespected. I feel belittled. I feel we're not collaborating, and then have a difficult conversation. And that's the tricky part. How do we bring that up in a conversation so that you can fix and improve it?
Oh my gosh. I'm wondering if you have a story from yourself or a client that kind of went through this process and kind of was able to identify what's working or what's not working in a relationship, and then make that shift, right? Start to have that difficult conversation and hopefully turn the relationship around.
I'll give you a client, a specific client. She came in and she used to. They're all they work in the same. She had a bunch of peers that work in the same level. She got a promotion, and now she becomes the boss of the people she used to be peers with, which is great. But her work ethic was, I'd say, above average. So she was very demanding with herself. She was a high performer, and it really drove her nuts that her friends and her people were not delivering at the level that she was expecting. And they were just fine performing well, but she wanted them to excel and she wanted them to give everything plus a little bit more. And, and this was a lot of frustration. And then her relationship with her peers, that when they were her peers used to be good, really declined as she became the manager because she expected them to perform as she did. But the way she communicated those expectations was by demanding and not by having conversation or understanding that maybe other people's values were different than hers. That family came first to some of these people, that life work balance was more important. She was single. She didn't have any children. So really her expectations were unreasonable, but she couldn't see that. She came to therapy because she was having burnout because of all the stress. And in our work together, the big thing, and I think the big key that turned for her was, how can you see people from their perspective? How can you be curious to understand how they work, and why aren't they giving 110% to the project like you are? And ultimately to accept their choice not to give 110% because they have different values. They have families, they have children, they have exercise, or whatever it is that to them was just as important as giving 110%. So that was a little bit of her work. She starts showing up at work with this mindset of, my way is not the right way. My way is one of many ways. And I think if I were to put, a headline to, what was her treatment about, what was her sessions about, is recognizing that her way was just one of many ways. And performing at 100% is just going to be enough. And recognizing that 100% might be good enough, right? Which is interesting because everybody's like, what? 100% is excellent. 95% is good enough. But she didn't. She was an overachiever and wanted everybody to go in. She wanted to be the best team. It was a big company. She wanted to be the best team. And this is not reasonable. So these are the kind of things that you as a leader, you need to understand, and you need sometimes to change your point of view. Sometimes it's the changes in you, and every case is a case, but this time it was for her to change this perspective. Sometimes it is about how do you communicate your expectations better. If let's say you're hoping for 85 and the team is delivering 60, well, that's a different conversation. The conversation is, why are we only delivering 60? This is not sustainable for a different reason. So every case is a case, but this one was great because it was about her recognizing that her way was just one of many.
Okay, so first is this idea of expectations, that we have expectations that maybe aren't being communicated, that maybe are unreasonable, that maybe are ours but not shared, but somehow there's a thing that's happening around expectations and what that can do to a relationship. Second, so I want to go back to that one, but second is this different values piece, that what is important to us may not be important to others, and what's important to others may not be important to us. And that those things aren't right or wrong, they're just different. And how important it is to acknowledge that we are all different people and we have different sets of values, and that those can come into conflict with each other. And then third is this idea of, us having to change our expectations or our behavior sometimes. And sometimes it's about the other person. So I feel like those are three different things I want to dive into more with you. So maybe we can start with this expectations piece. Can you say more about the role that expectations have in relationships and how we need to communicate those or manage those so that we can stay connected to people in a healthy way?
Expectations for both personal and professional relationships, they are the absolute number one change that needs to be implemented. Clearly communicating your expectations, because it's hard to follow and it's hard to work for somebody if you don't even know where we're going. Like, what's our general direction? Communicate the expectation as in, this is where we're expected to go, as in location, destination, but also communicate the expectation of, am I expecting you to work on the weekends, on the evenings, or what does 110% look like? Because to some people, it might be weekends and evenings and whatever. For other people, it just might be deliverables. So really, deliver 110%. I don't care if you're golfing on Wednesday at 2 p.m., right? If you get it done overnight, it doesn't bother me. So communicating what is expected or not. So I'm talking about specifics. Now, if I go into the workplace and we talk about the case of my client, for instance, where her expectations, and usually our expectations, are very aligned with our values. And those, that's your second point, but they're really enmeshed because our expectations come from what we believe is right. So when I tell you that I expect, if I'm asking a question on Friday at 4 p.m. and I expect a quick turnaround, and, in my head, I'm like, a quick turnaround for a Friday 4 p.m. question is Monday afternoon. Patricia, married, 2 children, has a lot of things to do in my spare time. Now, those are my values. Family comes before anything. My kids come before anything. So when you deliver that on a Monday afternoon, it's a-okay. Now, if somebody else, and this was the case of my client, unmarried, her value was, we need to succeed. We need to be the number one team. Success at works defines her. Success at works, thriving and being and going up that executive ladder was everything she always wanted as a child. Her parents communicated to her that we only make it if we're number one. She was the daughter of immigrants. And I can absolutely relate as a daughter of immigrants here in Canada. And that is kind of the narrative that a lot of us are told, is that we come to this country, we're going to endure the cold, but we're going to succeed. So succeeding is almost character defining, and it justifies why our parents did and endured what they did. So then all of a sudden, if you're not careful, that becomes your narrative, and that becomes your number one core value and defining character. But for other people, that might not be the same. So, but when you communicate, you open up the conversation. For me to go, hang on a second, Saturday, I have stuff with my kids. I won't be able to do that. Is Monday afternoon okay? And then we're open to that conversation. That's why the communication of expectations is so primordial, is because when you communicate it, it gives you the opportunity to agree, disagree, question, have a conversation about it. Whereas if I'm just expecting it here in silence, then we will have conflict. Absolutely.
Yes. Okay. So let's talk about that conflict piece then, because sometimes we can acknowledge we have different expectations, we can have different values, and yet we're still going to have conflict. We're still going to be coming at things from a different place. Can you talk a little bit about how we can work through that? Like, what are some of the tips and tricks for having those conversations when we are maybe at odds?
Conflict is always difficult to navigate. But of course, there are some, the tips and tricks. The hardest is also the most effective, which is try to remove emotion and engagement from it, and try to observe the situation from a pragmatic and a more objective perspective, right? So go back to the client again. Her expectations, well, once she adjusts, so it was 110%, she adjusted to 100%. So now you are working for a boss that expects 100%. So you're working for a high performing team. It's your choice to stay or to go. But if you're staying, you know that these are the stakes. You're going for 100%. Now, you might not think 100% is a good place to be. It's like, you know what? 90 is good enough, but she's going for 100. You might have that conversation, but where does pragmatism take place? Who's the boss? Do you want to be part of this team? So if you're in a high performing team and that is the expectation and that has been communicated, now, pragmatically speaking, well, the boss expects this kind of a delivery, then you do have to kind of, even if you disagree, this is the direction we're going in, right? Because ultimately somebody has to have the last word. So we can communicate and discuss all we want, but the owner of the company is the one who decides which way this is going to be. The boss is the one who decides. So there is kind of a hierarchy that ultimately decides. A good leader opens the space for dialogue and communication and contribution, but a good leader also needs to make that decision, and that's where that comes in. At one point or another, okay, I hear you. I understand what your point of view is. I see what you're saying. I'm taking that into consideration, but I still believe the best way to go is this. And then it's up to you, if you're the employee, to, all right, now I'm going to give my best because I was heard, I contributed. But if we're still doing the other way, and be the good employee, because also good performance comes from performing even in a direction that might not have been yours, but it's the best for the company.
It makes sense, right? Like I've had clients also where they don't feel like the culture has the same values that they have. And they always have to come down to like make a tough decision, which is you can try to change the culture, which you should do, right? You should have those conversations with your boss. You should bring it up with your team about what a great place to work could feel like and what it would look like for them and why. But ultimately, if you're not the one who gets to make all those decisions, your influence is limited in those ways, then you have to decide, is this a place that I want to continue to be at? Or is it time for me to move on to somewhere that does meet my values or my needs for whatever they may be? And it may be just this moment in time, or it may be a bigger change in your life. Okay, I want to shift gears here for a second, though, and talk about this part of kind of seeing something from someone else's perspective, which you mentioned before, too, about your client who, like, for her, she had a perspective around work, but she didn't have a perspective around work-life balance and being able to see something from someone else's perspective and what that does and how we can do that. So can you talk a little bit more about that kind of approach of trying to understand when something doesn't go or someone doesn't act the way that you think they should, what we can do to kind of like put ourselves in their shoes in a way that's actually helpful?
And this actually goes, because I wanted to comment on what you spoke about, sometimes you might need to quit the company if, it's something about you contributing to that culture and changing that culture because you should, but also quitting if it's not aligned with your values. And this is perfect because I'm actually moderating a retreat, a 2-day retreat for a company, and they're having a problem, which is, I'd say it's everywhere right now, which is you have management now. Boomers are all leaving. So you have Gen X and millennials as managers, and the workforce coming in, the Gen Ys, they come in with different values and they come in with different ways of working and seeing. And this conflict across generation is becoming, I would say it's almost harder than the conflict across cultures. So in Canada, we have a lot of conflict across cultures because we have so many different cultures. And I think the globalized workplace is having this, but I think somehow we found a way to navigate it. Not that there's not problems, but we kind of are figuring this out. The problem is when this generation comes in and they're so different. Now here, there is the idea that they have different perspectives and that every point of view is a view from a point. The management, I'll call them the dinosaurs. And the reason I'm calling them a dinosaur because I'm part of that. And, we are the types that we have metrics And we like a good PDF explaining what's going to happen next. And we believe in working hard to go up the ranks. And we believe that you work hard and you play hard. I love that song. I sing that thing all the time too. That's my Friday song. Like I work hard and then I play hard. So we believe in that. We believe that there is in the beginning of a career, dues you need to pay, some suffering involved. And is that right or wrong? I don't care. That's just a fact. That's how we think. And I'm putting myself here as the dinosaurs. Now you have the kids coming in. And the kids, I'm like anybody under 30, right? So the kids are coming in and they're fast. They're incredibly competent. They can do all the stuff we can't because I hire all the kids are working for me right now. And they're so much more efficient. They're so much smarter. They know all the stuff that I don't know. They're brilliant. Honestly, if I let go of the kids that work for me, I would be doomed. I'm not even exaggerating. So they're brilliant, right? But I will tell you, they're not going to work a 9 to 5 job, right? And they're not going to put up with crap because, work comes first. They're like, no, work does not come first. I have my anime, whatever meeting and they're off and I'm like, I have a deadline and they're like, I'm still going to do it. And it's 6 p.m. The deadline's tomorrow at 9. And sure enough, they do it. But at 6 p.m., they're doing the anime thing because at 3 a.m, they're working. And honestly, you have to let go of this need to control and kind of understand that it's a different way, but it still gets done. The thing is, if on the one hand, the dinosaurs need to understand this about the young people, that they do things in their own time, in their own way, and that they have a ton to contribute, a lot of my work is being done with the kids regarding, it feels weird to be called kids. I hope your young listeners are not insulted. And I say kids because I do have kids that age. And I think the one thing that the Gen Ys need to understand is, yes, it's okay to work at 3 a.m, but you need to deliver. So I'll give you the mental health days off. It's okay that you're doing it at 3 a.m, and I'll go sleep, because usually if there's something due at 9 a.m, I'd like to go to sleep with it being done. Right. But now I'm like, okay, I will go to sleep with it not being done and I'll be okay with the stress, but you need to deliver. It can be a human and a connected and a very easygoing workplace, but you need to deliver. You still need to be accountable. And I think that's the big word for the Gen Ys. It's like, we will adjust. I think the work for the dinosaurs is to adjust to their needs and their way of working. We absolutely need to do that. But the Gen Ys need to have accountability, right? You need to be accountable. You need to deliver and you need to take this seriously. So those are the two challenges and it is from both sides. So, I think they're both very valid. And this kind of work I've been doing quite often because I think it's a problem a lot of companies are having. How do we communicate and connect across these generations?
Yeah, well, I think it speaks to a concept you talk about in your book, which is having some flexibility, being able to identify for yourself what really matters and where can I be flexible to accommodate something that really matters to somebody else, but where we can still ultimately get to the same outcome that we both want, right? And as you're describing, like us dinosaurs need to be a little more relaxed in our schedule and our work from anywhere and our, the way that we expect things to happen in a certain way. And the kids, the young people, they need to understand that yes, flexibility is, we'll give you some flexibility, but also you still have to be accountable. And we still expect some communication around when things are done and keeping things on track, right? So that's like a place where we can all learn to be a little more flexible and having that in our relationships. Okay, unfortunately, we have to start to wrap up though. So Patricia, can you tell us about a great manager that you worked for and what made this person such a fabulous boss?
Great manager that I worked for. So when I graduated from my undergrad before I did my MBA, I worked in a company and I was hired. It was back in Brazil, and I was hired to be a bilingual translator. They bought some machines, and all the instruction manuals were in English. And by the way, because I'm a dinosaur, this is like way before the 2000s. This is back in the 1900s. And so I needed to translate all this document. There was no Google, there was no, so I was translating all these documents. And this boss, for some reason, he's like, what education do you have? He got talking to me, and he wasn't my boss. He was a level up, like he was a manager. And he realized that there was a lot more potential there than just translating documents and just being a bilingual translator. So he brought me on, and that's how I started working with procurement in industry. And he taught me Excel. So basically, he was a great manager because he could look at me and see the potential way beyond whatever work I was doing. And I think that's what a good leader does. It sees beyond the current activity. It's able to find potential.
Yes, 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 yes. Amazing. And where can people learn more about you? Tell us, what is your book? Where can people find it? All that good stuff.
So my book is called Connected: Building relationships to achieve success and make a lasting impact. So Connected, it is available on Amazon. It's available at Amplify, wherever you get your local books. They can all order it. My website is www.patriciabathory.com. And on LinkedIn, I think LinkedIn, everybody is there. Connect with me, send me questions, tell me if you like this, if you want to connect. It's all there.
Amazing. All right. Any final thoughts before we wrap up on how we can build great relationships and stay connected in healthy ways to our colleagues?
I think recognizing that getting along in the workplace goes a lot further than you might possibly imagine. And if you think it's already a superpower, you double down on that. It's way more than that. It's the way you're going to achieve success.
Perfect place to end. Thank you again so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Me too. Thank you very much for having me on your show.